I'll sit a little bit closer, Pete. All right, I've got some questions to lead me on my phone. So if no one could ring me for the next 30 minutes, that'd be great. And Mostyn, who knows me quite well, has put me just before lunch, knowing that shutting me up is sometimes tough. So we'll see how this goes. We'll move to the first one. There we go. Okay, so just a little bit of background. As Moss said, I'm the commercial director for Parkade, a parking technology provider, with multiple partnerships in terms of the products that we supply. So Portier in terms of parking guidance. We supply Genetec in terms of our CCTV access control, LPR and intercoms, and IP Parking out of the Netherlands that we supply in terms of a parking access control brand. I guess we'll start with Pete and I guess some background on Mirvac themselves and the portfolio that is looked after. So Pete, Mirvac's a large property group with a diverse portfolio. Can you touch about the different verticals that Mirvac are in, and particularly the retail sector that applies to you?
Yeah, sure. Mirvac, a big property company across Australia. Most people are probably familiar with them in some form. A lot of commercial buildings, a lot of residential buildings. Mirvac has a very large construction arm as well, building lots of residential buildings across the eastern seaboard and Perth as well. Getting into build to rent now, so building high-rise residential towers as the landlord. So that's their latest approach to resi building. But they also have a very significant retail sector, a lot of shopping centres, Rhodes being this one here pictured. Quite a number in Sydney. We've got about 12 across the board now. We used to have quite a few more. Broadway is probably our most significant one, Broadway, Sydney. But this was quite a significant one too, and an interesting project.
Yeah. So with such a diverse range of, I guess, in terms of the territories that you cover, as well as the verticals, is each of the assets, I guess, siloed? Are they in control of their own destiny, or is there a strategy across, particularly as it comes to technology?
Yeah, good question. They are siloed. We don't have a general approach across the board. There are some that just do a one-size-fits-all approach. This is what we do. All our centres, all our parking is like this. The only consistent approach across our centres, I guess, is me. I have a hand in all of it, but we like what we do in one site may be terrible in another site, and I'm firmly of the opinion that it's horses for courses. It's the site and what it requires. So what we did at Rhodes could be an absolute shocker at Broadway, and we'll get into it later. I actually think it will be, not because of your system, but just the type of system.
That's a good transition. You mentioned about your own role being that national role. So give us a bit of history about yourself, and then how you ended up in parking that none of us can escape.
Yeah, you can't get out, right? Why is that? 24 years at Mirvac, so it's been a while now, all in parking. I was actually studying at the time. I was studying civil engineering. I am technically a civil engineer. Go figure. But during that, I got a job at Mirvac whilst I was studying. Really good team. I got a managerial role pretty quick. I thought it'd be brief, but kind of stuck around. Flipped from one managerial project to another. I kind of enjoyed the human interaction aspect of parking. I figured no one wants to pay for parking, and I actually quite enjoy interacting with people on a psychological level, and engaging with people and making them pay for parking and convincing them that they need to pay for parking.
I've heard you down the intercom, mate. I have heard you down the intercom.
It's a bit of a skill, and it's an interesting character building exercise, and I figure if I can convince people of that, I can convince them of anything. It's actually quite enjoyable.
That's true. Okay, so Rhodes, we've gone from wide down to Rhodes itself. So Rhodes Waterside has a long history of parking tech, now on its third parking system. Can you give us a bit of an overview on the particular centre as it applies to the variety of user groups and any I've got a microphone, idiosyncrasies that you need to consider when you're dealing with tech?
Yeah, Rhodes is an interesting site. It's based in the Olympic Park area of Sydney. It's a large car park. It's got 2,400 spaces. It has multiple different entry and exit points. It has a very large IKEA. It's Australia's busiest IKEA. people come from all over just to visit Rhodes, just to go to IKEA, and on weekends it can be quite manic. I remember back in 2009, this is back when newspapers were more the primary media source than any other means. That centre got page 3 of the Sydney Morning Herald for all the congestion that it was getting. Massive photo. And then someone approached me at Mirvac and said, hey, can you go sort that out? So I thought, all right, there's a challenge. So we adopted a really good parking guidance system that sorted out the flow of traffic. Back then it was a data park parking system that had cashier booths and 25 staff in cashier booths taking cash and credit cards. And so we automated the whole process. We installed a shide embarkment system back then. We were the first, I believe, to successfully integrate license plate cameras with a ticketed parking system and have it talk really, really well. It monitored all the 3-hour turnaround people from the business park. We have a massive business park at Rhodes. There's about 5,000 office workers who work nearby, and they all were parking for 3 hours, going around the block, coming back in, so we stopped all of that. They then proceeded to start tailgating en masse, and our integrated license plate system stopped all of that. So it became almost a induction process amongst all the officers. When they inducted everyone, do not muck around at the Rhodes car park, they will get you. So our revenue spiked.
The first time I walked into your office and saw the wall of shame.
There
was
was
just
a
a
wall
list
of
of license
shame.
plates
That
with
was
the
quite
wall of
interesting.
shame.
There was a wall of shame. But it became very successful. And then of late, we've obviously adopted the Parkade IP parking system. We were just due for an upgrade, but we'll get into that.
Yeah, so that takes us on to, I've got to multitask. So that moves us on to the process. So the tender process itself, it's a big decision, right? So obviously there's the investment. You guys ran it in-house. That's in the tender process. So it's a big decision in terms of both time, effort, money spent in terms of resources, and then obviously the CapEx of the investment. So can you talk a little bit about what made this the right time for you in terms of that change?
Yeah, that existing system there, look, it ran well, but it was a good 12 years old by the time we were done with it. So it was pretty much just end of life. Parts were becoming very difficult to come by. And that was the main driver. It was time.
Okay, so at this point, I will remind you of the time that we've got to spend, and I will touch on the fact that the decision was made to go between hybrid LPR and ticketless. I know that was a pretty in-depth conversation internal within Mirvac and how it applies to other centres. Can you touch on a little bit on that conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. It was a rigorous conversation within Mirvac. What approach is the best approach? I was fully aware that there were certain people high up at Mirvac that wanted a ticketless system, an LPR ticketless system for the customer experience point of view. And I completely understood that. Knew full well that we'd probably end down that road, but I needed to stretch out that argument for a while so that I can plant the seed in their mind that it's not as clear-cut as you think. And it's not the be-all and end-all of customer experience. There are certain sites that we've done ticketless for, I've done ticketless with, and been happy to do that with. There's one down the road at Moonee Pond Central here in Melbourne, and we did that because all the entries were right on the street. We couldn't afford any sort of delay on entry, and it had to be a free flow in. So the only way to get council approval was to go ticketless. And if it's an unmanned site, absolutely. It should be a ticketless solution, bearing in mind that you will have some sort of revenue loss with misreads of license plate cameras. But I just needed them to understand that on certain sites, for example, Broadway, which is upcoming, a solution such as this is not the ideal solution, and it shouldn't be thought of as the ultimate technology parking solution for all car parks, because I'm all for a ticketless approach for customers. Yes, that free flow is a great customer experience, but there are ways to do it. There are opt-in ways to do it. We can have redundancy features, multiple forms of entry and exit, and have customers, if you want that experience, opt in, register with us. We'll capture your information, we'll market to you, it's win-win, and we'll offer you whatever you need, we can offer you if you register with us. So it's a no-brainer. I see it. If you've got a high revenue car park such as Broadway, there is great advantages for redundancy rather than just one means of entry via a license plate camera.
So from that, I guess the takeaway would be you need the stakeholders in the asset to go in eyes wide open and understand, I guess,
Definitely.
the trade-off, right? And that experience from you as the national parking manager, who's had, as you mentioned, Moonee Ponds, being a ski data ticketless system, and the experience that you've had through ticketed with LPR, you can lead some of those conversations to make sure that it's best result.
Yeah, and we went down the ticketless path with this, which was fine. At Rhodes, the issues that develop from ticketless parking, which is often at exits, are diluted at Rhodes because we have so many different exits at different points. So it's not felt as much. So that wasn't too bad. But yeah, it was good to have that discussion with them so that they can see going forward, it's not as clear cut as you think.
Okay, so question in my list that I like the most. So you ended up landing with Parkade, with IP Parking and Genetec. Being that we are one of the newer and smaller, well, we are, as part of those, the three that you had tender, can you give some insight into how you landed on the decision?
Yeah, sure. It was close. It was a really close run thing. It came down to the incumbent, the Scheiden-Bachmann model, or you guys. I wasn't phased about the relatively young aspect of your company. So yes, you're new into the market, but at the same time, there's a great deal of experience with their team. Many, many years of parking experience installations. There was no issue with that, and I informed all our stakeholders that that was not an issue with them. In the end, what swayed it was the fact that all our interactions with ticketless parking, LPR ticketless parking, the big issue is reliability of cameras and maintenance of license plate cameras. And a lot of the companies out there, because they're all third-party cameras, struggle to actually maintain their own cameras. Parkade cleverly integrated Genetec cameras with their IP parking system. Mirvac have rolled out Genetec CCTV across all our sites. So we have multiple technicians across multiple companies that can actually maintain these type of cameras. So there's no shortage of ability to actually run these cameras, which we're completely relying on for revenue now. So that was a key factor, as well as that integration point with Genetec, that CCTV system that we all use. There's a lot of potential there for us to integrate with Genetec and use some key features there.
Yeah. Look, there's a wealth of knowledge from the Genetec team locally, as well as what we can tap into directly in Montreal. So yeah, moving on, I guess the staff parking was originally, as part of the tender spec, was done by pass cards and stored value, and a way to put everything through the pay station. Now, during this final scoping process, we had conversations about digitising that entire platform, and we brought Mostyn and the UbiPark team in. So the decision was made to move staff to a digitised platform. Can you talk about the features that drew you to that, and what led you down that path?
Yeah, well, as discussed, the big focus for Mirvac was customer experience. This is what they were all talking about. So I figured, well, if we're going to go for that customer experience touch point, let's introduce UbiPark. We work closely with them to develop a really simplistic but effectual website with a URL link for everyone to register with. Really user-friendly. Everyone's actually quite enjoyed the use of it. Yeah, just a means of entry for all our different user groups, which is digitized, really accessible, easy to use, not hard to explain. So that's worked quite well.
Definitely helps. All right, moving on to the actual rollout itself. So we've made the decision, we've moved on, we've started procuring, and we've got a whole bunch of partners involved, and we've got them up there. So the deployment itself. So we touched on Mirvac's use of Genetec for security purposes, and then that was a key factor in adding this onto your parking environment and really blurring the lines between parking and security. So you guys were going through a CCTV upgrade with JD Security at the same time. So how important was the communication between your three major contractors, it being UbiPark, Parkade, and JD? And what benefits did you guys find from that the communication?
Yeah, that was key, because Rhodes was the last shopping centre in the Mirvac portfolio to actually come across to Genetec. So this was the last upgrade to Genetec CCTV, and we needed that to happen before we could even start installing the parking project. So we had set in stone a date for the parking, and it was important that Genetec was installed, so we can integrate into it. Otherwise, it just wouldn't work. So I had a lot going on internally with Mirvac, trying to organise all the installation process from our end, and I needed Parkade to interact with JD Security, our CCTV provider, to get both systems in and complete and integrated, and like they did a great job. You guys did a great job with that. So it was
Thanks, mate. Yeah, luckily we were fortunate being in the middle there that we already had an existing relationship with JD Security from other projects and just around the Genetec network, and also our long partnership with Ubi Park made this simple for us to sit in the middle. Okay, so internally though, so you're running a live car park. There's significant change to the way that people interact with your facility from a staff level, from a senior management level, and the average driver. How did you handle the communication? So the communication to all of those people to understand that the change was coming and how to handle it.
Yeah, like starting a new parking system is hard for everyone involved, all our stakeholders. So our main focus, because we were going to get all our different registered user types. We had retail parkers, we had corporate monthly parkers, corporate 2-day-a-week parkers, IKEA retail staff parkers. There's probably 3 more. Jesse probably knows more about it than I do. So we had to get that message across to them in particular. And so we focused on Ubi Park's interaction with Ubi Park to well in advance get everything sorted, our website sorted, all the presentation of it, all the nuances of that website to make sure that it was simple to use, easy to understand. So when it was ready to go, weeks before the rollout, we literally went door to door to every single stakeholder and said, "This is what you need to do, and here's how to register." Hired promotion staff, did the whole bit, and got the message across. And I thought it was going to be tricky, and it was time consuming, but it worked. It was we've got over 1,000 people registered pretty quickly, and for the most part, it worked quite well. There were obviously little hiccups that we resolved along the way and still resolving, but generally it went really well.
Awesome. Okay, in terms of the physical deployment of the parking system, unlike a new construction or with a shopping centre where 90% of the vehicles aren't paying, you guys have parking as a large revenue generator. And a complex list of user groups. So obviously you work close with my operations team. What strategies did you put in place to really minimise that downtime and aid in that transition?
Yeah, that was a key aspect from Mirvac's side. They didn't want too much downtime at all in a transition from an old to a new system. So we went lane by lane. We installed as much as we could on each lane without affecting the existing system. All the cabling was done, all the LPR cabling was sorted. The VRB digital boards were all installed prior to deactivating the old system. Pretty much everything that we could do lane to lane without disrupting our existing flow was done. And then we eventually called a date and then switched off the old system and ripped it all out. And a few days later, the new system was in, and it was a pretty smooth transition. Yeah,
if I could recall correctly, there were some entry locations where Free Flow was going to allow you, or Ticketless was going to allow you to go from 2 down to 1, which enabled us to install the new system and then leave the old one still active and then turn that off, so that minimised disruption. And there were certain locations where you were going from 2 pay stations down to 1 because of the digitisation, which was able to minimise that. So we could still leave the old pay station up and install next to it. Yeah, that sort of stuff. Okay, so moving on to the post-delivery. You mentioned the unification of the security and parking platforms were obviously massively important and a big part of the decision. Having Genetec as a way to offer that customer service and take advantage of the existing infrastructure, while also giving security access to some of the features, the LPR reads and research and all that sort of stuff. So what useful features have you seen thus far? And then where do you see it going based on the conversations, the sales guys' conversations that I've had with you?
Yeah, well, as mentioned early on, so that integration piece with the IP parking system and Genetec was one of the major factors that we went with. So that's been really good. So all our intercom calls come through the Genetec system. It's automatic pop-ups, cars there, number plates there, see the driver there, with instantaneous conversations, clickable number plates. We can search all histories of that person right there and then through the Genetec system. We have alarm pop-ups immediately for our staff to see. So CCTV pop-ups of any sort of incident that happens in the car park to any gate, any vehicle, with pre-recorded timeframes, 30 seconds before and after, so it pops up on the screen so the guys know immediately when something's going on in the car park that requires attention, which was very, very handy. And then down the track, like this is a great customer service or experience point where we get a lot of email back and forth from customers, so much interaction with customers. And sometimes customers will accuse our staff of saying certain things over intercoms and or falsify some sort of claim over what was said over an intercom. So we can, through this system, down the track, just via inputting number plates, see a whole history of that vehicle, all its interactions via intercom, audio, video come up, it's all recorded, all logged, so we can see exactly what has been said and what has happened at that exit.
For those who aren't, I guess, totally experienced in the Genetec platform, what we're referring to is actually a unified platform. So this is a single screen that's got your video, LPR, and intercoms in it. So where Pete's talking about pop-ups and things like that, it's what we would refer to as the single pane of glass. So you're not jumping between systems. We're not maintaining separate points of integrations and separate points of failure. Everything is on the one screen and they don't need to jump between the two or three. The other key factor is there's a parking instance of Genetec Security Centre, and then there's the main security system, and we are federated and connected between the two. What that means is if there's an incident in the car park, security can log in via their security centre and search for plates. Through the security system, they're actually tapping into the parking system. And we're also recording intercom calls in the same platform as reading license plates. So all of a sudden, we're now unifying these incidents and tracking a user license plate and every interaction they've had with his staff. What he's also referring to in terms of the pre-record, everything in Genetec that generates an event can then be unified with other elements of the platform. So when you've got an event of, say, we've mapped the barrier arm, so the barrier arm gets knocked off, ripped off, whatever happens, that generates an event within the CCTV system, and when he clicks on that event, it automatically rewinds to 15 seconds before, so you're not just looking at the incident, you're looking at everything that led up to that, all in a single screen. Okay, so moving on to the experience with the digitised platform. So we've talked about our part, let's talk about UbiPark's part, you know. Okay, so what is the experience of yourself and the customers? What have you liked about that platform, and where can you see it going for Mirvac? Is there anything that you see it being rolled out to expanding on that?
Yeah, the platform's been excellent to use, actually. It's simple presentation, which is what we wanted. They white labeled it for our shopping centre, so when people get on there, they think it's ours. It's not UbiPark's. Although they get, registered emails from UbiPark, but that's okay. It's really easy to use, so it's simple to explain. We've had some really good feedback from it. I think our customers like the fact that they have their own account, they can manage their own accounts, they can change their own number plates, they can change their own credit cards on there. So it's a self-managed little entity for them, which empowers them, and it's a great little customer experience for them. So that's gone well. It's gone better than I thought, that aspect of it, which was good.
Don't sound so surprised, mate. Come on.
I wasn't doubting you guys, I was doubting our customers. They're a special lot sometimes. Going forward, a part of the reason why we wanted UbiPark on board was we would like to reach out to our casual customers as well, the regular shopper, so we can register them as well, so we can offer them incentives to register, and we'll do that at some point. And then we'll know all this information about them when they're in the car park. We can market directly to them. So again, win-win for them and us, and so there's great potential there.
Excellent. And then one day roll it out to Broadway. Yeah?
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so we'll wrap it up with the final question. You've now been through the process. You've brought on, you've blurred the lines between security and parking. You've digitised your platforms. What have you learned? What would you do again? And what would you not do again?
Look, I'd love to say that I did everything correct and it was fantastic, and it was a big process. It was massive. The main thing, I think we discussed this before, is what I learned is that I wouldn't let people in the business convince me ever again to do it on my own, because Mirvac's a big company, and I realised pretty quickly that every single person on a project like this wanted a hand and wanted their say, and I had every single division of Mirvac coming at me from different directions saying, hey, let's talk, let's have a meeting about this and discuss our input into your system. So that took up a lot of time. So I would say that going forward, we would ensure that a really experienced project manager is assigned to jobs like this. It really should have been. It was my advice in the first place, but I kind of let him sway me into thinking, yeah, I can do it, which we did. It was fine. But going forward, we'll make sure that we get some really experienced project management involved as well, and make sure all our bases are covered well in time before any rollout.
And I would assume that that's only going to be more difficult if your contractors were unknown to each other. If you've got someone in the middle trying to coordinate that.
Definitely. So that was helpful. You guys were good in that respect, for sure.
Thanks, mate. Well, I guess that's it, talking about the case study. Thanks, Pete, for coming down from Sydney, and thanks for your time.
You're welcome.
And yeah.
Yeah, we'll do some questions. Has there anyone got any questions for Peter or Gary? I've got one. Would you do tickets or ticketless moving forward?
Depends on the site. What are we talking about? Broadway?
Oh, we'll go with Broadway. Oh, if you were doing Rhodes again, would you do ticket or ticketless?
If it was completely up to me, I'd do a hybrid system, and I'd have multiple forms of entry, and I'd make everyone register with us if they want a ticketless experience. I just have this mindset that parking systems aren't designed to have vehicles in the car park that are unknown to it, and you're forcing it to do something at an exit that it's not designed to do. And any notion that customer experience trumps that, I suggest that any sort of operational inefficiency that you willingly introduce to a parking system is going to eventually get passed on to your customers. I think it's a fallacy to say that, you can just bypass that by saying customer experience is great. So the more control you have, the better your customer experience will be. I think that every single intercom call at an exit, when you've got a system where you're not entirely sure how an exit is dealing, or your system is dealing with that customer, based on the fact that your system may not know who that customer is, it takes longer for you to figure out what's going on with that customer. Whereas when you have a system where everybody's registered, everybody's known, everybody's understood, you take a call, you know before that person even stops talking, you know exactly what's going on, and you can resolve that issue. So customer experience is actually beneficial in that respect.
Very
I
good.
suppose you've obviously got that understanding of the leakage element too, right? So if you do have a 3R3 centre and you don't have a mix of monthly parkers or commuters wanting to use your facility, well then that's probably less important. But if revenue is key, then you don't want that.
Absolutely, yeah.
Get out of jail free cards.
Yeah, and I think when you at a high revenue car park, like Broadway is a high revenue car park, when you start to lose revenue automatically by misreads of number plates, unless you're really attentive, ongoing to constantly maintaining and managing that will only ever exponentially grow. It's not going to maintain itself at that rate. It'll get worse as people learn to exploit it, because that's what people do. So you got to cut out the loopholes where you can.
Cool.
Any other questions? Mark? I'll get over there. Hopefully I won't run Elmer over.
I was interested in a couple of things. What were your breakdown and failure rates on ticketed systems and people exiting versus, and early days there probably would have been for the regular users on the automated ticketless system, how they compared? And has the systems, now that they're automated, also integrated with incentivised from the retailers? The retailers choose to be in that location, and I draw the comparison of the cinemas actually validate parking for, because they're long stay. That's a relatively small spend, but yet for larger spends in retail stores, people go, I've just spent $1,200 and I've got to pay for parking. So those sorts of things being integrated as well.
Yeah, no, good question. As I said earlier, to put if you have any sort of system with a ticketed, any sort of high volume system that has tickets in some form, even if we went hybrid and we had people register with us to get ticketless parking to alleviate some of that ticketed parking volume, still, just the presence of tickets, you need on-site staff. If you have a unmanned site, remotely operated site, you're probably going to have to go ticketless. That's what you're going to need to do. Because yes, there is a maintenance aspect to ticketed entries especially, and exits. It's all about maintaining your equipment. We always had staff on site at Rhodes. We have staff on site at Broadway. And part of their routine is to continually clean and maintain machines. It's part of their routine. And as long as you do that, it runs very, very efficiently. We had almost zero downtime. Like there was hardly ever any lanes out of action for any significant length of time. So it's all about maintenance and making sure you're on top of that. So that wasn't a real issue with the ticketed site. Yes, the ticketless site, there's no real downtime issue. That's a positive. There's no downtime issue with exits and tickets and that kind of thing. So that's a positive. With the secondary part of your question, yeah, that is it's in the leases of all these cinemas that they get that extra hour or 2 hours free parking. And yes, we do get a lot of feedback as to, well, it's a $20 spend on a movie ticket and you get 2 hours extra free, as opposed to spending $300 at this shop and I get nothing. We can't offer it to everyone. It's pretty much purely because it's in their lease. But yes, we can, through any system, you can offer discounted validations through whichever means that you have, ticketed or ticketless or QR code or barcode. You can integrate that into your systems and create validations, definitely.
It's really interesting, I guess, from the sales and the tender point of view. Even though that ticketless as a concept has been around for quite some time now, like the Westfield Miranda has been in for a long time, there's still a change of mentality coming in when end users are calculating the cost of life, right? So when someone says, yeah, but look at how much I spend on tickets, and it's not about I always say it's not about the 98.5% you read correctly. It's about how you give the tools to the operator to be able to deal with that 1.5%, 2%. And if your daily maximum is $50 and there's a leakage as someone's let out, well, that's a lot of tickets at 1 cent a ticket. So there's all those calculations that occur, but also, as you touched on, less moving parts, less wear and tear, less maintenance. We're now starting to see people only request preventative maintenance once every 6 months physically on site, and then the other quarter that used to be on site being remote and dealing with the software and OCR problems and those sort of things. There is a mental shift in the industry about, it used to be just a quarterly preventive maintenance is what you do. Now maybe that's not the way, and we can save the end user money. I'm not leading ticketless or ticketed because I sell both. So it's just a horses for courses element. Yeah.
Well, thank you both very much, especially you, Peter, for allowing us to be in the project, and Gary for allowing us to be part of your bid.
What are you going to say, especially me?
Well, no, Peter's more important than you. I've worked that out. He was talking about Broadway, so... but no, I think just for a touch, and Jesse and I were talking about this the other day, but the project at Rhodes is pretty complex around a few things. There's some internal sort of nesting areas where people need to go out certain exits and things like that, but it wasn't part of a proper nested area type of scenario, and there's some tricks in there. But what it does do is actually challenges us to come up with better solutions. and working with customers with real-time solutions actually makes our product better. So we really appreciate that you've taken the time to take us through that, and hopefully we can get some solutions with IPP to some of those things that we'd like to do better.
We'll get there.
We will. If you'd all like to let me thank Gary and Peter.